Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, we talk with Dr. Roger McEowen, Ag and Tax Law Specialist, the Washburn School of Law, for our monthly conversation. A couple of big cases have been decided by the Supreme Court. We'll talk about it. We'll also have features from Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Department of Agriculture, and Kansas Grain Sorghum, along with a weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agriculture news, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office announcing that it has filed a dispute settlement under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement in response to Mexico's ban on biotech corn for human consumption. The National Corn Growers called the administration to act and praise the development. The president of that group says Mexico's action, not based in sound science, have threatened the financial well-being of corn growers in rural communities. Under the agreement, once a dispute settlement gets filed, the group of objective experts will hear the case, then make a final determination based on the commitments of both parties under the free trade agreement. Ambassador Tai said Mexico's measures are inconsistent with several of its obligations in the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and market access chapters to the agreement. Well, USDA says America's agriculture exports in fiscal year 2023 forecast $181 billion. That's down $3.5 billion from the February forecast. This revision is driven by decreases in corn, wheat, beef, and poultry exports. Corn exports forecast $2.1 billion lower at $14.5 billion on lower units and values and volume, as Brazil is projected to record a record second corn crop. Wheat exports projected down $900 million to $7.4 billion because of lower volume and value, as well as an increased competition. Soybean exports projected at $300 million to $32.3 billion on slightly higher volume. Total livestock, poultry, and dairy exports expected to increase by some $1.2 billion to $39.3 billion. The decline in beef and poultry exports will be more than offset by increases in what we see in dairy. And a new report out from CoBank said grain merchandisers enduring rising costs of storing and carrying grain and oilseed inventories in the last year because of the rising interest rates, higher crop prices, rising operating costs like transportation, insurance, fuel, electricity, and labor, also squeezing the grain elevators. CoBank forecasts the financial cost to carry will reach record highs in the 23-24 crop year for corn, wheat, and soybeans. Grain elevators are required to buy and market members co-op, regardless of whether economics are favorable for those crops. And one thing elevators can control, though, is those local bids and inverted futures market for the penalized elevators for having to store grains and oilseed. And if interest rates stay at the current levels, future markets remain inverted in a new crop year. Many grain co-ops are expected to lower their bids and widen their basis for the high cost of storing those commodities. That's Ag News. We'll come back with Dr. Roger McEowen here on the Kansas Ag Report.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
And our guest is Dr. Roger McEowen, who is an ag and tax law specialist at the Washburn School of Law. Dr. McEowen, thanks for joining us once again.
Good to be with you, Ken. Thank you.
Well, since last we have talked, there's been a couple of things we've been waiting on, some of these big ag issues taken up by the Supreme Court. And the first one let's talk about is Sackett versus EPA dealing with the Clean Water Act.
Yeah, the Sacketts out in Idaho bought property near Priest Lake, which is way up in kind of the upper peninsula of, I guess, well, it's not really an upper peninsula, but they're really narrow area, kind of like a peninsula in Idaho near the Canadian border, and beautiful area. And they bought their lot. They wanted to build a home, so they started backfilling the lot with dirt to prepare it for their home building. EPA came in and told them their lot was a water of the United States because the lot was near a ditch that fed into a creek that ultimately flowed into Priest Lake, which is a navigable water of it's an intrastate lake. And they said the backfilling violated the Clean Water Act. So the EPA threatened them about $40,000 in penalties per day if they kept doing that. And Sackett sued. They actually made two trips to the U.S. Supreme Court. First one was to get EPA to make a final determination that they did have a wetland that they could appeal from. Supreme Court forced EPA to make that determination, so they did. And then we get back to the court again on the issue of, is it really a wetland or not?
So then what was in that Supreme Court ruling then?
Well, a whole bunch of stuff. The majority, which was Alito, Roberts, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Barrett, reversed the Ninth Circuit and ruled for the Sacketts that their lot was not a wetland subject to the Clean Water Act. And in fact, all of the justices said that their land was not a wetland. So that was 9-0. But the five that I just referenced for you, those five said that the test for determining whether an isolated wetland is a water of the United States is that it has to have a continuous surface connection with a navigable water of the United States, with a WOTUS. And since there was no continuous surface flow from the Sackett's lot to Priest Lake, it was not a wetland. Now there was it wasn't a dissent, it was kind of a concurring dissent, if there is such a thing. They said that's too narrow of a test, but that's just four dissenting or concurring justices, so that doesn't really matter. But the key for us in agriculture is the significant nexus test is gone, replaced with a continuous surface flow test.
So then what does this mean for the latest, that 2023 WOTUS rule?
Yeah, it's gone. And again, I was one that was thinking all along, boy, it's kind of foolish for the agency to go ahead and write a rule before we know what the law is, before the Supreme Court rules on it. And so that's a lot of wasted time and money because that was all based on significant nexus, and that's gone now. And we go back to basically what Justice Scalia said in 2006 in the Rapinos opinion, which was the plurality opinion, and that you have to have this continuous surface flow.
So what does this mean for agriculture moving forward?
Well, I think the implications are significant. It really solidifies the Trump rule, the National Water Protection Rule of 2019 is the correct approach, and probably is even a little bit tighter than the Trump rule was. In other words, more favorable for agriculture. So federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act now is limited to traditional navigable waters and their tributaries. So your streams and your ditches, your private waters that don't have a continuous surface connection to navigable waters won't be subject to the Clean Water Act. So your ephemeral streams in western Kansas, your prairie pothole region in the Dakotas, Minnesota, parts of Iowa, not subject to the Clean Water Act. Now, Swamp Buster, yeah, Swamp Buster's got a different definition of a well. So if you're in the farm programs, you might still be subject to Swamp Buster, even though EPA and the Corps won't have jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act.
We're talking with Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. He is an ag and tax law specialist. We're going to take a quick break, talk about another big issue when we return in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And our guest is Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. He's an ag and tax law specialist, joins us every month. And Dr. McEowen, since last you and I talked also, Supreme Court came down on Proposition 12. Now, this is one that all of anybody that raises livestock had grave concerns about. So give us the background just to kind of refresh us on all this.
Yeah, and good to be with you again, Ken. California passed Proposition 12 in the November election in the fall of 2018, and it bans, among other things, pork meat that comes from breeding pigs that are confined in a cruel manner, according to California. And that would be sow crates that California deems to be too small. So, two out-of-state pork producers challenged the laws unconstitutionally interfering with their preferred way of doing business, and that violated, they said, the Dormant Commerce Clause. Of course, the Congress has the power to regulate commerce among the states, and they can preempt state laws, but they hadn't done that in this situation, so that led to the case.
Okay, so any insight to why the ruling was, kind of the way it was? Was it a surprise to you?
Not really, because we know going in that there are two and maybe three justices that don't even believe the Dormant Commerce Clause exists.
Mm.
So, and I was one that had been writing and saying for months that this case was being argued incorrectly, and that's exactly how this came out. And indeed, Justice Kavanaugh told him, if you argue your case correctly, we might actually be able to hear it and get you past the motion to dismiss, which I'll come back to in a moment. But there were actually 5 different opinions in this case. Justice Gorsuch wrote the primary one for the court, and basically they said they couldn't even get to the merits because the hog producers failed to state a claim as a matter of law. So if there's a surprise here, that's it, that they never got to the merits. Normally, there would be a balancing. When you have a Commerce Clause case, there would be a balancing of the in-state benefit with the out-of-state harm. But the court said because California didn't purposely discriminate against other states in terms of how hogs are raised, then the producers had to show a substantial burden on interstate commerce. And the court said that they said there wasn't a substantial burden, so there's no balancing. You don't even get to balancing. In fact, Justice Barrett said that they had no way to even measure the benefits and burdens. So no balancing, and you're not going to get to the merits of the case.
So what are the broader implications then for agriculture?
Well, this is where really the concerns are. Does the rest? My main concern is whether the rest of agriculture really understands what the implications of this decision might be. Do consumers of food products understand? Will we have the morals, I put that in quotes, of one state dictating agricultural practices in other states in other areas of production? So where does that go, and where does it end? And that's what I'm concerned that we may not understand. A lot of people may not understand the implications of this, because this is open-ended until Congress decides that they need to deal with this issue and stop states from doing this stuff.
Okay, so then where do we go from here since this ruling is now has been made?
Yeah, and the court pointed out, Ken, on a couple of occasions, they said, look, there have been attempts by the Congress to deal with this. It was Representative King from Iowa a number of years ago that had legislation that didn't get in a farm bill that would have prevented this from happening. And that's presently in Senator Marshall's hands here from Kansas. He's taken it up, put a different name on it. But clearly the court's saying, hey, it's up to Congress to deal with this issue. Now, the concern I have with that is, do we really want the Congress micromanaging production methods? So, maybe this should be addressed in the farm bill that's being discussed now, but something should be done, or we're going to have one state cannibalizing another state, and there's no end to it.
Well, Dr. McEowen, if folks want to learn more, because we just hardly ever have time to always get through all the different things, how can folks read more about these cases?
Yeah, you can find lengthy discussions on my blog, articles on my blog, and that's accessible through my homepage of my website, which is washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. Also, you can find them on the Ag Manager website for K-State Department of Ag Econ.
All right, Dr. McEowen, as always, thanks. Very insightful yet again this month.
Thank you, Ken.
Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law has joined us. We will have more coming up in just a moment. Stay with us.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Kansas has seen growth in the dairy industry in recent years, and the Kansas Department of Agriculture will be celebrating dairy this month, as the governor has officially declared that June 2023 will be recognized as Kansas Dairy Month. Kansas dairy farms increased milk production last year, and we have seen growth in dairy processing as well. So now 47% of the milk that's produced in Kansas is processed here in the state. Kansas is home to 175,000 dairy cows on 200 dairy farms, with the industry contributing $1.4 billion to the Kansas economy. We know that growth looks different throughout the state, from the smaller and mid-sized dairies in the eastern side of the state doing on-farm processing and selling locally, to the larger dairies in the western half that work with cooperatives or directly with processors. From large to small, all of the dairy operations have an important role to play in the growth of Kansas dairy and are valued members of Kansas agriculture. Much of the growth in dairy production in recent decades can be traced to innovation in the industry, as dairy operations have learned to improve efficiency and increase production through genetics, nutrition, and technology. Dairies are now bringing even more wholesome, safe, and nutritious dairy products to families in Kansas and across the nation. We're thankful for Kansas dairy farmers who work every day to provide milk and milk products for the people of Kansas. Dairy Life is a 24/7, 365 commitment by Kansas dairy farmers who are dedicated to the health, comfort, and well-being of their cows, and to providing high-quality dairy products, which are an important part of a nutritious diet. So join us and enjoy Kansas milk, cheese, yogurt, and ice cream as we celebrate the important contributions of the Kansas dairy industry during Kansas Dairy Month this June.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
You grow the soybeans and see your checkoff dollars invested. That investment drives soybean research, promotion, and education efforts to build additional farm-level value. Your soybean oil is in high demand from the food industry. Soybean oil remains the most common vegetable oil in the U.S. and is often labeled and sold as just that, vegetable oil. In fact, just over half of the soybean oil used in the U.S. goes to the food industry. Food companies and restaurants rely on it for frying, baking, and other food preparation. High-oleic soybean oil excels in high-heat uses like frying. Soy lecithin adds and protects texture and flavor in many foods. In the grocery store, pure vegetable oil, salad dressings, spreads, and more contain soybean oil. High-oleic soybean oil is a source of omega-3 with 0 grams trans fat. As a renewable, reliable resource, demand for soybean oil goes far beyond food. Soybean oil can replace petroleum and other volatile ingredients in many industrial and consumer products. The primary example is biodiesel or renewable diesel, both cleaner burning, renewable alternatives to petroleum diesel. Soybean oil accounts for about half the feedstock used to produce biodiesel, which can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 86% when blended into the U.S. fuel supply. Soybean oil, when used industrially, also helps satisfy demand for sustainable, environmentally friendly products and can even increase product performance. For example, Goodyear and the United Soybean Board funded research that discovered using soybean oil in tires resulted in better traction in wet and winter conditions. The company launched 4 lines of soy-based tires offered in a wide range of cars, minivans, and SUVs on the road today. Building on this success, Goodyear intends to increase its use of soybean oil by more than 25% and replace all petroleum-derived processing oils with soybean oil in its tires by 2040. There are so many more uses of soybean products in the world. The Soybean Checkoff's Soy Products Guide contains more than 1,000 items currently on the market, from flooring and roofing products to candles and personal care items. Soybeans impact feed, food, fuel, and countless other areas. Because of your checkoff investment, you can focus on growing your soybeans while your soy checkoff is hard at work growing value for U.S. soy farmers.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Hi everyone, Maddie Meyer, Director of Programs for Kansas Grain Sorghum here to provide you with the recent drought outlook information for sorghum acreage as we gear up for the 2023 planting season. The past couple of weeks has really brought on much needed moisture across the state, especially out west. Reports of over 2 inches of rain in the Dodge City area the week of May 15 was definitely something to highlight, and that rainfall is really going to be beneficial for our growers. In fact, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor website, we've seen drought conditions improve from exceptional to extreme drought by 6%, so it's relieving to see things improve in that regard. Earlier this year, the USDA had reported that sorghum farmers will plant just under 6 million acres in the sorghum belt, which means that acres would be down 5% when compared to 2022. However, as we hope to continue to get more rain to pull us out of this statewide drought, there continues to be many factors looking out for the sorghum crop that could hopefully increase acreage, especially when we remember its drought-resistant properties and its use in livestock feed, and more specifically, dairy cattle. In a Seed Today article that was published earlier this spring, researchers at Texas A&M University found that male sterile sorghum, when included as an ingredient in silage, may be able to provide the same highly digestible fiber content as corn silage, while remaining water efficient. While the research remains in its preliminary stages, sorghum continues to be a quality option in times of drought, especially as a feed source. This would be a great opportunity, especially for farmers on irrigated land. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more Outlook information as we head into the month of June. Thank you.
Rural families are built different, but life isn't always easy.
Mental health would be kind of like bankruptcy. If you don't take care of it first, it could spiral downward. There is help out there, and to reach out and get help before it's too late.
There is help. Talk to a family member or your doctor. Text or call 988. Above all, don't suffer in silence. For more resources, visit kfb.org/Rural Minds Matter.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
June 1st, designated as World Milk Day, was the launch of National Dairy Month. The month of June has held this title since the late 1930s, making it the perfect time to celebrate the many contributions the dairy industry makes not only to the Kansas economy, but also to the health of consumers. Consistently ranked as one of the fastest growing dairy states, Kansas has doubled its milk production since 1994 and now is a $1 billion industry. Combined, the direct impact of the dairy cattle and milk production sectors on the state's economy is $738.96 million in output and 1,032 jobs, according to a Kansas Department of Agriculture economic report. With indirect and induced effects included, the total impact increases to $1.4 billion in output and 3,934 jobs. When it comes to nutrition, dairy products make many positive contributions. Milk contains 13 13 essential nutrients like high-quality protein, calcium, zinc, and vitamins A, B, and D. These are important for muscle repair, maintaining strong bones and teeth, and supporting a healthy immune system. More information about the Kansas dairy industry can be found at kla.org/dairy.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and LibertyLink that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
Good morning, this is Jake McCall with Pinion Ag. We are steadily making our way into the summer growing season after a very rapid spring planting pace. Now that the majority of the crop is in the ground, all eyes will be on the weather forecast to determine this year's crop, and the market will be watching. So far, there's still a lot of ground with less moisture than would be ideal, especially in western Kansas and Nebraska. However, some relief has been found in scattered showers over the past few weeks that will attempt to replenish soil moisture where it can. Grains rallied across the board last week going into Memorial Day weekend, but from there it will largely be a weather market as we see that the U.S. is continually priced over the world market, a phenomenon demonstrated continually by poor export numbers. Cattle markets continue to march higher as we've seen an unseasonably strong cash trade for fat steers. With a large spread between northern and southern cash prices, it is likely that cattle will be trucked from south to north to fill this opportunity. In other spaces, all markets are still watching to see how the debt ceiling will be handled in D.C. While it is more than likely a deal will be reached, it is always a subject that unnerves Wall Street investors. If you have any questions or would like to discuss your marketing strategies, feel free to reach out at 888-452-8751. I'm Jake McCall with Pinion Ag, and I hope you have a safe and productive day.
That's our show this week. Be social with us online, kansasagreport.net, or our social media channels. We're thankful for the rain that fell over most of the state of Kansas. We hope that if you haven't received some yet, you will very soon. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk with you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.